You're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam. Streaming on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and at DCAUreview.com. Now, here's today's episode.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 110 of the DCAU Review. I'm one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, the other host, my co-host, my good brother, and the gentleman that runs our Twitter page. It is Liam. Liam, welcome back to another week of the DCAU Review.
Yes, sir. We are smack dab in the middle of our latest stint in Metropolis, the DCAU Metropolis, I should say. And we have another fun episode, as you kind of touched on last week. These, while it's not quite the same as far as the story content goes, it's certainly a different animal entirely. There's a lot of elements of this episode that give me some more nostalgic feelings for one of my favorite shows, Smallville. And that is because we are talking about the Superman the Animated Series episode, My Girl, this week.
That's right. This episode originally debuted back on November 23rd, 1996, Liam, so putting us coming up on the 24-year anniversary of this in this upcoming November. This is another one of those first season episodes that I can tell you, Liam, I saw this episode ad nauseum. I can remember very, very vividly on Saturday mornings watching the intro, because they would play the intro first for this episode, and as soon as that opening scene kicked in with this weird techno music being played for the Lana Lang fashion show, it was like, no. But with that being said, I did get some enjoyment out of seeing it after not having seen it in quite a long time. But before we get into our standard review of our four categories, Liam, let us get the official Internet Movie Database synopsis for this week's episode.
That's right, and this is for the episode My Girl, which was written by Hilary J. Bader, directed by Yuichiro Yano, with music by Lolita Ritmanis, and that synopsis reads as such. Clark reunites with his old girlfriend, Lana Lang, who volunteers to spy for him on her new lover, Lex Luthor. Sorry, I couldn't get through that one without. See, like, nobody in the real world uses the word lover, so there's no way to make that not. I can't say that word and not do like a silly voice when I say it.
I love it.
But yes,
I love it. Yeah,
that's a
fits
decent
well.
basic. Yeah, the decent basic synopsis of this episode is that, as you mentioned, Cal, at the start of the episode, Clark and Lois are covering some fashion show that Lex Luthor happens to be in attendance to with his new girlfriend, who also happens to be running the fashion show, and that is, of course, Clark's high school girlfriend from Smallville, Lana Lang. And
or Lana Lang. It depends on who's saying
yes.
Lana or Lana. It depends on who's saying it, honestly.
That's true, because I mean, Superman says Lana throughout the whole episode, but I think once again, I'm probably going to bring up Smallville a lot in this episode. I had it so burned into my brain that it was pronounced Lana on that show that
right.
That I probably can't help but say Lana every time. But yeah, it might actually be Lana on this show, to be fair.
Well, it's funny because I'm pretty sure I think that Lex calls her Lana at least once or twice, and I believe Mercy calls her Lana. I believe it was Mercy, or maybe it's Lois. I'm not sure, but it's sort of like in The Empire Strikes Back, where for 3/4 of that movie, people for some reason are calling Han Solo Han. We're just not sure why in the middle of the movie they just started changing the pronunciation of his name, but right. It's just a thing that happened, and we're just going to move past it.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. That's a good pull. But yeah, the episode from there is pretty straightforward. Lex is up to his usual tricks. Of course, at this point in the series, he's still just the evil businessman, so he's not really committing direct crimes, but he's apparently has acquired some sort of surplus of weapons, which he is selling through this shady arms dealer named Elon to a third part. To, I guess they just kind of say terrorists. They don't. I don't think they name a country or anything this time, but Lex up to his usual tricks, and that coincides with these two random people try to kidnap Lana, and which of course gets her and Superman face to face, and she decides she's gonna spy on Lex to help Superman bring him down, but of course she's not particularly subtle about it, so Mercy and Lex kind of figure it out pretty quickly and turn her over to Elon, who attempts to kill her via molten lead, which is, hey, that's pretty creative.
It's definitely outside of the scope of the normal way that a villain would kill somebody.
I mean, it's good that he did that, and then also that he announced his plans to her, because if he had just shot her at her apartment, I mean, Superman wouldn't have gotten there in time. So I guess
the episode would have been over.
Yeah, it would have been a real downer ending to this one. But of course, Superman shows up and saves the day at the end. And there's like a subplot throughout the episode where Lana is sort of trying to rekindle their high school romance, and Superman is sort of uneasy, and you don't really get a feel for, I feel like in this episode, how until the very end, when they sort of discuss things openly, how Superman really feels about like her being back and her wanting to rekindle their romance. You don't really get a feeling, I feel like, on how Superman is really absorbing all of this, because the episode is much more focused on the points of view of Lana and to a lesser extent Lex, I feel like. So
it's weird. It kind of comes out to me. It kind of came out of left field because he's not flirting with her openly, but he knows that she's with Lex and she's rendezvousing with him quite often. She's, being a source for him, even though he's sort of doesn't want her to be. She's constantly being a source to him. She's kind of pitching herself as the future like sidekick to his Superman. She even goes as far to say that to be his Batgirl, she says at one point. But he's very reluctant, but he kisses her at one point, or she kisses him at one point, and there's I guess at the end he makes it clear to her that he's just not quite that interested in her anymore. So despite her interest in him.
Yeah, there's that, and there's one other little thing in this episode, because obviously, as we said, we're introduced that she's dating Lex, and at first Superman warns her, he's no good, he's a criminal, and she doesn't believe him, but then she, starts to overhear things and decides she's going to help Superman stop him, like we said, and by the end of the episode, like, Lex is, like, legitimately upset about it, and I wanted to ask your opinion on this, because I couldn't get a feel for if it's supposed to be Lex was genuinely saw a future with her and is heartbroken, or if it's just because she's helping his most hated rival in Superman. I couldn't tell if it was more of a he's actually sad, or if it's more supposed to be that he just hates Superman so much and this is just another thing Superman has taken from him.
I think it's difficult to place it. I would tend to go with the latter, because we don't get, even throughout this series, or then again in later iterations of him in the DCAU, we don't see him really as the ladies' man Lex. He's not a playboy. He's not set up like Bruce Wayne. Even Bruce Wayne, quote unquote, billionaire playboy is sort of toned way down. He has his flirtations here and there with various people, and certainly involved with various people, but he isn't ever portrayed to have a gaggle of women that he's constantly involved with, or even the same woman that he's constantly involved with. So even more or less so, Lex is not portrayed as he's the bachelor of Metropolis that's out swooning and trying to corral people. He's sort of, there's some sort of relationship between him and Mercy that is intimated but never quite fleshed out all the way. But so I because of that, because we never get that, and then of course he has that relationship with Enchantress. I think it's Enchantress in the later episodes of the DCAU. but he's never quite fleshed out as this ladies man. So I would say that it would definitely, if it was anybody else, it seemed to me he was using Lana just for the publicity almost, or for the the stature of her, this upcoming fashion designer, than it was him being legitimately interested in her, especially that he didn't go off the rails and simply try and kill. He wanted her dead, not because she cheated on him with Superman. It's because she squealed, she gave away his plans. She was a snitch.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's just an interesting little wrinkle to it, is that, and again, to your point, we never really have another scenario like this, so it's hard to really get a feel for it. But I almost felt like in that scene where Mercy comes in at the end to tell him that Mr. Elon has taken over or whatever, and he just yells at her to get out. And I was trying to I just had this little inclination of is it supposed to be that he actually really did like her, and he's disappointed? But yeah, I think the way you laid it out makes as much sense as anything. And as we said, Superman shows up, saves the day, and then we wrap it up with, as we mentioned, this little scene of Clark telling Lana that he cares for her, but that he's just not interested in her that way, and she kind of walks off into the sunset as they have this kind of very funny conversation as they're as Lana's telling them, one day you'll find somebody that's kind and sweet and quiet, and then immediately they're both interrupted by Lois Lane yelling at the top of her lungs,
shouting.
Yeah, it's it's a very obvious joke, but it's still really funny and really well done, and we'll get more into that in voice acting. But overall, I think it's a solid episode. I think it's fun to kind of explore some of this stuff that really hasn't been touched on. Obviously, this is still earlier in the series, but for the most part on episodes that we've watched of Superman thus far, romance has certainly not been a topic that has really come up very often. So I thought it was an interesting enough story, and it's kind of always fun, as I said, because of a lot of these elements of a Clark, Lana, Lex love triangle. Again, invokes a lot of nostalgia for some of those middle seasons of Smallville. So for all those reasons, I gave Plot a 7 out of 10.
I'm right there with you. I gave it a notch lower. I went 6 out of 10. It is an interesting episode for an early episode, also with not a lot of established threats, I guess, in the Superman mythos. I guess it makes sense. It didn't, at no point to me did it seem like Superman was in any danger of being hurt. To me, the entire tension was built around, is Lana going to be okay? Which, I guess that built some tension in it, but even that, it was Superman knew right away, Lex tries to give her this swerve and tell, leaks this information in front of her because he knows she's she's listening to him. She's overhearing this conversation. He leaks that the weapons that he's trying to trade are stashed in Central City, which is a nice first mention there of Central City here in the DCAU. But this is before the team up episode, I believe. Mm-hmm. So you get a mention of Central City there, and she tells Superman, obviously, and Superman immediately knows better and thinks that Lex was setting him up. So he doesn't even go to Central City. So there's no tension built there. It's oh, Superman went to Central City, now he has to rush back, or it's just oh, well, he knew it wasn't there all along. And there's no tension even built as to how he's going to find it. It's just Elon has Lana tied up, and he's, like you said, giving her his entire plan, and Superman busts in, and he's hey, I have great hearing. It's awesome. Great. Awesome. Well, there was no real tension built up there. With that said, there are some fun and enjoyable moments. There's some good back and forth, and it's Superman versus Lex Luthor in a way that is cerebral rather than fisticuffs. So yeah, I gave it a 6 out of 10.
Cool.
All right, let's move on, Liam, to animation and visuals. Before we get into the meat and the potatoes of the animation and visuals, I have to tell you that I went back and forth on giving this a very low score and giving this a high score because there are, I think, a lot of visually great and interesting things here. But I feel like the characters are off model for the majority of the episode. So before we get into what your thoughts were, so TMS was the animation studio that did this episode. And we've talked about, we've had several episodes where we've talked about the different animation studios. TMS is one of the ones that they outsourced to, from what I could see pretty frequently, actually, for that first season of Superman. And of course, they did some great episodes like Clayface Part 2, but then they also did Fear of Victory, which was one of the lowest scored episodes we've ever had as far as animation and visuals are concerned. So they have this sort of up and down, and I know they did a lot of the new Batman adventures. I feel like they relied heavily on them because they were doing multiple shows at a time at this point in time. They were doing Batman, they were doing Superman, and then eventually they brought in Batman Beyond. So you have multiple episodes, and the one animation team can't work on 3 shows at the same time. It's just impossible. So they started outsourcing to this TMS. So visually, there's a lot of interesting things that I think are well done, but to me, I think the character model seemed off almost the entire episode.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that. Just like weird things, I feel like the shape of Superman's head is a little weird. It's like stuff that you would think, like the whole point of this simplified style when they moved over to Superman the Animated Series and then with the new Batman Adventures was kind of eliminating a lot of those problems, I think, with their animation teams and storyboard artists, because they went to a much more simple, easier to adapt style. So it's kind of rare. We've talked about that. There's been a couple other Superman episodes I think we've talked about. I think one of the parts of Apocalypse Now comes to mind where it's just, for whatever reason, it's just weird and off. And there's definitely some of that here. That being said, I think the action is well paced, and I love the him saving the train, because that's just like such a classic Superman gag.
Absolutely.
Everything from the Fleischer cartoons to Christopher Reeve to Smallville to tons and tons of different comic books. Superman having to stop a runaway train or save a train full of people is kind of a very classic Superman thing. And I thought they did a creative way of doing it in a way that I've never seen it done before, where he sort of takes these 2 rails from an unfinished part of the railroad and kind of just holds them up where the track is out and tries to hold them up in place as the train passes over top. So I thought that was really clever. I liked the visualization of these weird guns that the bad guys use, where they like shoot them and then this sort of weird effect goes over whatever object it hits, and then it explodes. I thought that was a clever thing, and I think that final sequence where all the vats of lead have exploded in the factory and the whole place is just covered in lead. I thought that was a really interesting visual as well, and the whole sort of destruction of the factory. So I agree that I think Superman especially is like kind of just, again, it's not terrible. It's not, it's not like the worst thing I've ever seen or anything, but I do think you have a point there about it being sort of off model, and it's enough that you notice. And
yeah.
That all being said, I still went with a strong score for animation, and I actually gave it an 8 out of 10.
Nice. I, again, gave it just a notch lower. I went 7 out of 10. There were a couple things that I noticed that I also enjoyed. I think that scene, the final scene, really, well, the next to last scene where they're in the lead factory, that scene stands out as one that was visually very interesting. There's one of these vats with the melted hot molten lead gets turned over, and it's suddenly filling the entire factory, and Superman actually has to get submerged in the lead himself. So he comes out to try and save Lana, and she gives this awesome she gives one look at him, she says, "You're a mess," and then she the light falls. he has to catch her, and somehow, even though he's covered in molten lead, she's not burned by that. But
I like to think that he's fast enough that he like shook it off of the hand he caught her with on his way out. Like he shook it off his hands first, and then somehow got it off the rest of him by the time he was flying out of the building holding her and Elin. But
there you go. Yeah, I mean that made sense. Yeah, because by the time he was out of the exploding factory, he was completely uncovered by it. So there's actually another something in that scene that I may mention just a little bit later. But that scene itself stands out, and I thought it was really, really great. I thought so. Elin, the character himself, and I know this is many, many moons before Man of Steel came out, but I happened to notice that Elin sort of resembled Michael Shannon, who plays Zod in Man of Steel. For those of you who don't know, very famous actor. He also, he looks more like modern day Michael Shannon. If you saw him in the Waco docudrama, the docudrama that they did on the Waco, Texas thing, he looks very similar to him. I don't know if there was a specific person that was designed off of, but I thought it was close enough, and there's that Superman connection there where I was like, oh, that's cool. That's a nice nod, or not nice nod, depending on if they meant it or not. We also get the return of the brown and yellow Clark Kent suit in this episode. I don't know if you noticed that. Yeah. Clark is driving in his car, and this time he does have a yellow shirt on with a black tie. So it's almost exactly the same suit that Bruce Wayne wears. I think it's just the pants are darker than the jacket, as opposed to the way that Bruce wears it.
Yeah, but we get a suit change because he's in the sort of traditional blue and red at the end. So it's like, I feel like usually when they're in the one outfit, it's usually what they're in for the whole episode. So, and we get Clark in a tux in this episode. So a lot of quick change Superman, if you will.
There you go. Hey, they should make a figure of that. There are a lot of visually interesting things here. But like I said, the off-model nature of it sort of took me out of it at some points. Overall, visually, it is certainly a very interesting episode overall, though.
Definitely.
All right, Liam, let's move on to music. Now, I feel like this is where, if this was a video podcast, we would post that Bernie Sanders meme, the I am once again asking you meme, because so we have been championing for several weeks that, hey, WB, you need to release these soundtracks for episodes that have not been released before. We talked a lot about Batman Beyond, Justice League Unlimited. Last week, I praised WB. Thank you for releasing Superman the Animated Series soundtrack on a 4-disc CD. I went back to review that today, and wouldn't you know, silly me, I didn't realize it's not a complete. How could it be on 4 discs when there's 50 some episodes of Superman the Animated Series?
Right.
It is not a complete soundtrack. So they have released one edition of the soundtrack with episodes scattered from first to last season, missing many, many episodes. And of course, My Girl happens to be one of them. So as I stated at the beginning of the episode, the music in the very opening scene is very memorable to me and was an instant channel changer for several years. But overall, I think the music builds some tension in the scenes. There's not a lot because there's not like a main villain. We do get some of the Lex Luthor theme woven as he's sort of pondering and realizing that Lana is sort of turning on him or not on his side. I felt that come through. But overall, to me, it was just general mood-setting music. With that said, I think it adds to the tension in the final scene very well. So I gave music a 6 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I'm right. I'm right at the exact same score, actually 6 out of 10. The most noticeable thing to me is when the two random women kidnap Lana at the start of the episode. When they throw her into the elevator, there's this super like jazzy like swinging, like it's swinging music to it, and I was like, oh, this is an interesting theme, and it reminds me kind of, I don't know, like the Bullet for Bullock or some of those like really kind of out there, more jazzy themes. I was like, oh, I wonder if this is going to have like this is going to be kind of the theme for the whole episode. But we don't really get that past that opening scene. And then from there on, and again, it's difficult because I'm sure there's a lot of great work done by Lolita Romanis in this episode that is just hard to pick up on when you have, voice acting and sound effects and all that layered in on top of it. But you get, I love as I said, the sequence where he has to save the train. You get sort of dramatic music and then interwoven with the Superman theme. I always think that's the way, very similar to the way they Shirley Walker and Lolita Romanis and the rest of the composers in Batman the Animated Series would be able to kind of weave in the music of the episode with the Batman theme. I think they're showing a similar acumen here, similar ability to do that with the Superman theme, where you can kind of have a big dramatic moment with sort of more, normal, I don't like the word generic, but sort of more traditional action or dramatic music playing, and then you sort of, when you cut back to Superman, and whatever actions he's taking, you kind of layer in the Superman theme on top. I thought that was clever. So yeah, music 6 out of 10, good, but nothing super standout, at least that we could hear.
Right, exactly. I am once again asking Warner Brothers and La La Land Records to please release your music on streaming services.
We'd love to give you our money,
Please. All right, let us move on to our final category of the day. Liam, I have a couple new and a couple of returning voices here for our voice cast. Who's notable for this week?
Yeah, we have some returning guest characters like Mercy, played by Lisa Edelstein, who we've heard quite a few times. Again, very minor role in this episode. She's just kind of there to move the plot along, but I thought it was worth mentioning her. We have Larry Drake as the evil arms dealer Elon, who was tons of voice acting work in his career, including playing Pops on Johnny Bravo. And I believe he also did a voice on Batman Beyond, although it wasn't a character name I recognize. I believe in the episode The Winning Edge, he voices somebody. But he might voice the Doctor in Batman in the Winning Edge.
Oh, okay.
Not 100% on that, because again, I don't remember that Doctor's name.
Right.
But anyway, I like him. Again, he's just kind of this generic, sleazy bad guy, but I think he does a good job. And his turn at the end when he shows up to kidnap Lana, I think is good.
Agreed.
Yeah, we have Laurie Frazier and Valerie Bromfield as Lizzie and Big Susan, which are apparently the names of those random women who tried to kidnap. I think Big Susan is a fantastic name, by the way, and I'm sad she never came back, because she should. I like that character design, and I just thought that was when I saw her name in the credits, I was like, Big Susan is the best supervillain name I've ever heard.
It's just a bizarre, it's like a bizarre one-off appearance and very specific. Like, they could have used any generic, like, you got to wonder if that was an homage to somebody in particular, or friends of somebody, or what the story is behind those characters. Because, again, they didn't just use a generic, model that they reused over and over again. It's somebody specific that they used and never used again.
Yep, and then we have Jolie Fisher as Lana Lang, who folks might know from The Mask or Inspector Gadget, generally like any comedy from the 90s. She's one of those women that you maybe wouldn't recognize the name, but if you see her face, you'll probably remember her. She was she's also done a lot of other voice acting, but I really like her as Lana. I think, again, maybe it's just because, and we don't get a lot of Dana Delaney as Lois in this episode, but obviously that's sort of a little bit of the point of the episode, at least at the end there, is to contrast this, loving, nice woman who just wants to help Clark versus, and, is pining after him, versus this sort of, loud, opinionated, sure of herself woman that Clark is sort of pining after on the other side of it. So I really like her as Lana, though.
Yeah, she does a really, really good job. She talks for a lot of the episode.
Yes.
She has a lot to do, and for somebody who's not a series regular and not somebody that comes back, that's asking a lot of somebody, and we've seen that in the past where that can be very difficult to do. You know, we've seen huge named actors like guys like William H. Macy who have come into episodes and guest starred and asked to do huge roles, and we've been sort of less than impressed with. But then you have somebody who's required or asked to come in here and very on in this series carry almost an entire episode on their own or have a lot of scenes to do with the lead that's also sort of learning their character in a way. So yeah, she does, for what was asked of her and for what this character is, she does a really, really great job. I agree.
I still don't see how you knew.
Oh, come on, Clark. Just because I'm gorgeous doesn't mean I'm stupid. I saw you do all those amazing things back in high school, then Superman shows up in Metropolis the same time as you do.
How do you know when I showed up in Metropolis?
I've been keeping track. Root beer float? See, I didn't forget.
Lana, I've come to warn you.
About Lex, I know, everyone has. Powerful men get those kinds of reputations. And I like powerful men.
Lana, this is no joke. That man Luthor was speaking with tonight, he's a known arms dealer, responsible for the deaths of thousands of people.
And you think Lex is buying weapons through him?
No, selling. I think Luthor's got a stockpile somewhere he's trying to unload.
Well, you're wrong. Besides, I know how to handle Lex. I know how to handle most men, in fact. It's only Clark Kent I've ever had any trouble pinning down.
For me, Lana, just be careful.
For you, Clark, anything.
Yeah, and then of course we have Clancy Brown as Lex Luthor, who I really like him a lot in this episode. Like we said, the questions about his sort of motivation notwithstanding, he's just already, as we keep mentioning, this is pretty early in the production order of the series, and I think we've talked about that in pretty much every episode of Superman we reviewed that he appears in. But it's just he knew it. Like the second he got this role, he knew exactly how to play it, and yeah, he's really, really great in this episode as well, I think.
Yeah, it's not a ton, but yeah, even the fact that we were asking, like, is his motivation because he really liked her, or is his motivation because he's just angry at Superman? I think that's great that we don't know, that we sort of have to interpret that, because that means that it wasn't obvious in the way that he was acting one way or the other, which, you know, in a way they left it sort of ambiguous. So the fact that his acting came through also is ambiguous. I think that's a testament to, yeah, Clancy Brown's great. We always talk about how great he is.
Absolutely. And then, wrapping it up, we have Tim Daly's Superman. And, you know, we've talked about this a lot, especially in these first season episodes. He tends to be a bit monotone, and I think that is at play here. I don't think he's bad necessarily, but I also think it's playing off of, as he does so much in this episode, playing off Jolie Fisher as Lana, and to a lesser extent Dana Delaney as Lois. He's kind of so dry, and everything is so straightforward. But I do love the line, because I think it's a line that only Tim Daly Superman maybe could get away with, which is when the terrorists are testing these weird weapons and they're blowing up trees and a deer runs out.
I think it's deer season.
Sorry, it's only open season on terrorists.
And somebody goes, "Oh, it's deer season," and he shoots at it, and Superman lands and saves the deer, and he says, "Sorry, it's only open season on terrorists." And I don't know if anybody, even like another animated Superman, could have pulled off that line as well as Tim Daly's Superman did, because that's such a silly, like, goofy line, but he pulled it off.
Yep, absolutely. There's even a line somewhere. I believe Clark says it. It's either Clark or Lana says. I think it's Lana. It says, "Thanks to Superman" or something like that, which is a nod, of course, to the Fleischer cartoons and the Superman radio program of the 40s, where that's kind of what their throw to would be what Clark's throw to. Oh yes, it was all done thanks to Superman. So yeah, I agree with you though. The fact that Clark is able to deliver that line with a straight face, and it didn't sound goofy. There are a lot of those quips sometimes that you're just like, you gotta roll your eyes. Terry has a quip, or some of those Batman the Animated Series episodes where Batman has a quip. It's like,
I'm an equal opportunity crime fighter.
Yeah. There's been several of those where you're just kind of like, that doesn't seem very Batman, but okay. But yeah, this seemed to fit the Superman character well. I agree.
And I liked that first scene where Lana sort of first tells him that she knows he's Clark, where she's just, and again, it felt very natural to her for when she goes, "Oh, let me guess, Martha sewed it for you," and that little exchange they have, and Superman kind of being taken aback by it, and then Lex running in to check on her, so Superman kind of flies away before they can really discuss it. I thought everybody is for the most part very good in this episode, and I gave voice acting actually a perfect 10 out of 10.
Wow, awesome. I went a little bit lower. I went 8 out of 10 on my score. I think there's some good stuff here, and I think that again, some of the characters are still finding their footing on some things. I really would have loved to have seen a little more interaction between Lois and Lana. We don't get that. Actually, you know what? Sidebar. I almost would have preferred if doing at some point during a crossover, they did a Bruce and Lana Lang sort of thing also, because that would have been very interesting, because she's obviously very high society. She's rich. She's a fashion designer. And to see Bruce interact with another one of Clark's girls, as it were, I think would have been interesting. It kind of made me miss that as an opportunity there. But yeah, very, very strong episode voice wise though.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, well, let's total. Whoa. Oh. Yep. Yeah, you got it. That's right. There is a bonus point sound there. Liam, I sort of, briefly sort of alluded to it when we were talking visuals, that there was something in that final scene there at the lead factory that I thought was visually pretty awesome. Did you happen to notice the homage to the Fleischer Superman cartoons?
I actually had that in my notes and had forgotten to mention it when we talked about visuals, so it's quite fortuitous that you bring it up now. But yes, similarly in the Fleischer short Mechanical Monsters, there's some sort of molten lava is about to pour on Lois, and Superman sort of rushes in and stands over her and sort of spreads out his cape so that it doesn't fall on her. And we get quite a similar moment here with Superman saving Lana in a pretty similar way.
Yeah, I thought that stood out. It was fantastic. Having just done a review of some of those Fleischer cartoons just a few months ago, which you can hear in the archives at the DCAUreview.com if you're interested. That was in our Elseworld Superman month. We reviewed 2 of those Fleischer cartoons. But you immediately get flashbacks to that. He extends his cape out, and it's from a different perspective. It's not the shot-for-shot remake, but it's clearly an homage to that.
Yes.
It's clearly a nod to, hey, these cartoons came first, and we talked about it all in that episode, so go back and listen to it. But we know that without those original Fleischer cartoons, these Superman cartoons would not exist. So the fact that they're there and they are able to wink and nod and give their homages there in a way that is not a shot-for-shot remake, but for those who know what it is, it sticks out. It left me. I was like, that was awesome. That was a great way to include that. And that visual in those original cartoons was absolutely stunning. I definitely remember us talking about it in our review. So for it to come back again and Superman to sort of use his cape as a shield to protect her from being scalded by this molten lava or molten lead in this case, I loved that. So I had to throw in an extra bonus point for that straight homage to the Fleischer cartoons.
Nice.
All right, so let's total everything up here, Liam. Totaling up our scores here, I am coming up with a final score of 28 out of 40.
Yeah, and I'm a touch higher there. My final score is 31 out of 40.
Very good. All right, Liam. So here's what we all want to know is rewatchability. I would say in the grand scheme of things, Lana doesn't come back except for she only comes back in that one small appearance in The Late Mr. Kent, if I recall, right?
Well, there's also she shows up in in a future Toyman episode, which we
that's
may or may
right.
not be reviewing later this month.
Oh, that's right. So let me take that back. Okay. So yeah, I guess then based on the fact that this is a returning character, this is a part, you get to see part of Clark's past come from that very first episode, The Last Son of Krypton, sort of what happened when, if you're a fan of any Superman comics or Smallville or any of those things that you've seen this character, Lana, before, seeing how the DC...
If you're a fan of Superman 3 starring Richard Pryor specifically.
Many fans of that movie.
Naturally.
Yeah, I would say that it's a necessity in just that, hey, it builds some more backstory for Superman, at least in that it adds to the Superman Lex rivalry, I guess. So I give this a rewatch or a one thumb up. What about you?
Yeah, I would say so. Just for, as you mentioned, she does sort of play a minor part in The Late Mr. Kent, and then is kind of a big supporting character in a future episode. So yeah, I think it's worth a watch. And as an episode, like we said, it's not perfect, but it does have some really strong points in it. So yeah, I think this is worth a rewatch, especially. Lana Lang is not the most consequential character to the DCAU, so yeah, if you're only trying to watch like the benchmarks for the whole universe, you could probably skip this one. But if you're looking for like specific episodes that are kind of important to just this show, just Superman, then yeah, I think this is worth a rewatch.
And there's some neat visuals along the way, some, as you said, the classic Superman locomotive trope and, a couple of the other things that we talked about here. Even if I didn't think that the character design was the best of the series, it's still visually, there are a lot of interesting things and worth a rewatch for sure.
Agreed.
All right, Liam. Well, that will wrap us up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, as we always remind you, subscribe to us on your favorite podcast app, whether Apple, Google, or Spotify, or iHeartRadio, or any of those podcast places. You can subscribe to us on there. We would also, if they allow you to leave a review, we would love for you to do that. Leave us a 5-star review. It helps us. It helps get more people to listen to our program. It's very easy to do so now through Apple Music, also, or Apple Podcasts. You can go right in the app there, give us a 5-star review, leave us some feedback, tell us what you like. Maybe you want to leave in that review more episodes you want to see of a particular series reviewed. Give it feedback there, or you can always tweet Liam at DCAU Review. That is our Twitter page. Liam is always talking about all the things happening in the DCAU and certainly in the DC and comics as a whole. Before we move forward, Liam, let's give the good listeners a preview, which they probably already would have known if they had been following you on Twitter. But let's talk about what we're going to be reviewing next week on next week's DCAU Review.
Yes, that's right. We are, in fact, going to be reviewing another important character's DCAU debut, and that is the debut of Lobo in The Main Man, Parts 1 and 2.
Man, we have been sort of scratching to review this one. Of course, we reviewed the Justice League episode Hereafter that he appears in, but we have yet to sort of cover his initial appearance here. So Brad Garrett as Lobo, what else could you ask for?
That's right. Definitely can't wait to tackle that two-parter. Lots of fun stuff to talk about, so definitely looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't forget also to follow us on Instagram. Liam posts, we'll post clips on there from upcoming episodes. We get our Flashback Fridays on there. We'll recommend an older episode maybe from the archives that you haven't heard yet. And we're also talking
this week. You've been putting up some photos of the new Batman: The Adventures Continue toy line. We're starting to get some photos of the actual toys in package showing up.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on all social media and podcast apps. But until next week, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.